The billionaire hides his fortune for 1 year to test his girlfriend, but he never imagined who her family was. The roar of a Lamborghini Aventador echoed through the streets of the bustling metropolis. Jack Morrison, a handsome 35-year-old man, skillfully drove through traffic, his face reflecting a mixture of determination and melancholy. At first glance, anyone would think he had it all: incalculable wealth, successful businesses worldwide, and a mansion that rivaled the most luxurious palaces. However, something was missing in his life, something that all the money in the world couldn't buy. True love. Jack parked in front of an imposing skyscraper, the headquarters of his business empire. As he rode the private elevator to the top floor, his mind wandered. How many times had he been deceived by women who only sought his money? How many superficial relationships had he had to endure? Loneliness consumed him, and he was determined to change his fate. Upon reaching his office, his faithful assistant Sarah greeted him with a kind smile. "Good morning, Mr. Morrison. You have a video conference with the Tokyo investors in 15 minutes. Jack nodded distractedly. "Thank you, Sarah. But first I need you to call an urgent meeting with the executive team. I have an important announcement to make." Sarah, surprised by the seriousness in her boss's tone, nodded and hurried to comply with the order. In less than an hour, the boardroom was filled with expectant executives. Jack entered with a firm step and took his place at the head of the table. His gaze swept over the faces of his trusted employees before speaking. "Gentlemen, I've made a decision that will change the course of our lives. I've decided to disappear." A murmur of astonishment swept through the room. Jack raised a hand to silence the voices. "It's not what you think. I'm not going to abandon the company or sell my shares. I'm simply going to step away from public life for a while. I need to find myself, and to do that, I must live a normal life away from the spotlight and gossip magazines." The silence that followed his words was deafening. Finally, his vice president, Michael Carter, dared to speak. "But Jack, how do you plan to achieve this? You're one of the most recognized men in the country." Jack smiled enigmatically. "I have a plan. For the next year, I'll live under a false identity in a small town. I'll work as a mechanic and experience life from a completely different perspective. Meanwhile, you'll be in charge of keeping the business afloat." The room erupted into chaos of voices and questions. Jack answered them one by one, patiently, explaining the details of his plan. By the end of the meeting, everyone was committed to keeping the secret and helping in whatever way necessary. That night, as he packed a modest suitcase with simple clothes, Jack received a call from his best friend, Tom Sanders. "Are you sure about this, Jack? It seems crazy." Jack sighed. "It's the only way, Tom. I need to know if someone can love me for who I am, not for what I have." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. "All right, friend. You know you can count on me for whatever you need." "Thanks, Tom. In fact, I need you to do me a huge favor. I need you to be my eyes and ears here while I'm gone, and above all, to keep my secret safe." "You can count on it," Tom replied firmly. The next morning, before dawn, Jack Morrison got into an old Chevy he had bought second-hand. With his heart pounding, he drove into the unknown, leaving behind his life of luxury and comfort. As the sun began to peek over the horizon, Jack couldn't help but smile. For the first time in years, he felt free. Free from expectations, free from appearances, free to simply be himself. What he didn't know was that this journey would take him down a path full of challenges, disappointments, and perhaps the true love he so longed for. The small town of Oakridge seemed like it was, straight out of a postcard. Quaint houses with well-tended gardens, a central square with a century-old fountain, and quiet streets where everyone knew each other. It was here that Jack, now known as Jake Miller, decided to start his new life. With his business experience and innate ability with numbers, it wasn't difficult for him to get a job as an assistant at the town's mechanic shop. The owner, old Bill, a man with a kind face, was impressed by the young man's dedication and enthusiasm. "Boy, you learn fast," he said one day, as Jake wiped sweat and grease from his face. "If you keep this up, you'll soon be the best mechanic in Oakridge." Jake smiled, feeling a satisfaction he had never experienced in his luxurious offices. Here, every achievement, no matter how small, felt genuine and deserved. It was during his 3rd month in town when he saw her for the first time. He was closing the shop when an old pickup truck stopped in front of him, smoke billowing from under the hood. A woman who took his breath away stepped out. She had brown hair tied back in a messy ponytail, and her green eyes shone with determination despite her evident frustration with her broken-down vehicle. She wore worn jeans and a plaid shirt, but to Jake, she seemed like the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. "Excuse me," she said, approaching. "I know you're closing, but my truck decided to die right here. Is there any chance?" "Of course," Jake replied, unable to take his eyes off her. "Let's see what we can do." While working on the engine, he discovered that her name was Emma Thompson, the new teacher at the town's elementary school. She had arrived recently, looking for a change in her life after a romantic disappointment in the city. "Sometimes I think true love only exists in fairy tales," Emma commented with a sad smile as she watched Jake work. He looked at her, feeling an instant connection. "Maybe we just need to believe a little more," he responded, surprising himself with the hope in his voice. That night, after fixing Emma's truck, Jake couldn't sleep. His mind was filled with images of green eyes and warm smiles. For the first time since he arrived in town, he felt that maybe, just maybe, he had found a reason to stay in the following days. Jake found himself inventing excuses to pass by the school. Whether it was to check on Emma's car or simply to say hello, each encounter made his heart beat faster. Emma, for her part, felt intrigued by this mechanic with kind eyes and strong hands. There was something about him, a depth and intelligence that seemed out of place in a small-town repair shop. It was during a local fair when they finally took the first step. Under the colored lights and the scent of cotton candy, Jake invited Emma for a walk. "You know," she said as they walked, "when I came here, I thought it would be a boring place. But now I don't know. There's something magical about this town." Jake looked at her, losing himself in her eyes. "Maybe the magic isn't in the place, but in the people we find." Their gazes met, and for a moment the world around them disappeared. Slowly, as if drawn by an invisible force, their lips came together in a soft and sweet kiss. When they parted, they both knew that something had changed. What began as a spark of attraction had turned into a flame of love that promised to grow. However, as Jake allowed himself to be carried away by the excitement of this new love, a voice in the back of his mind reminded him of his true identity and the purpose of his stay in Oakridge. Could Emma love him if she knew who he really was? Or was he destined to repeat the mistakes of the past? The happiness of the moment, mixed with a touch of anxiety, Jake knew that sooner or later he would have to face the truth. But for now, he decided to enjoy the feeling of having Emma in his arms, under the starry sky of Oakridge. As the romance between Jake and Emma blossomed in Oakridge, hundreds of miles away in the bustling city, Tom Sanders found himself at a moral crossroads. As Jack Morrison's best friend and confidant, he had promised to keep his secret and protect his interests. However, as the months passed, the temptation to take advantage of the situation for his own benefit began. To grow, Tom had always lived in Jack's shadow. Although their friendship was genuine, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy every time he saw his friend's success and wealth. Now, with Jack out of the way, the opportunities seemed endless. One afternoon, while reviewing some documents in Jack's office, Tom discovered something that would change the course of events. Among the papers, he found an old photograph of Emma Thompson at a charity gala. The description on the back revealed that she was the daughter of a prominent businessman who had fallen from grace years ago. Well, Tom muttered, a malicious smile forming on his lips. It seems our dear Jack isn't the only one with secrets. Meanwhile, in Oakridge, Jake and Emma were enjoying the simplicity of their growing love. They spent afternoons walking around town, sharing ice cream in the square, or simply talking on the porch of the small house Jake rented. "You know," Emma said one night as they watched the stars, "I never thought I'd find this peace in a place like this with you. I feel like I can be myself." Jake looked at her, his heart beating fast. He wanted to tell her the truth, confess who he really was, but the fear of losing her held him back. "I feel the same way," he replied instead, hugging her tightly. However, the bubble of happiness they were living in was about to be threatened. Tom, driven by greed and jealousy, decided to make a surprise visit to Oakridge. He arrived on a Saturday morning, dressed in an expensive suit that completely clashed with the relaxed atmosphere of the town. He found Jake at the shop, working on an old Ford. "Jack, old friend," Tom exclaimed, deliberately using his real name. Jake visibly tensed, looking around to make sure no one else had heard. "Tom, what are you doing here?" he asked quietly, leading his friend to a secluded corner. "Oh, just passing by to see how my favorite billionaire was doing," Tom replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Although I must say you look quite different." Jake frowned, feeling that something wasn't right. "Tom, I appreciate your visit, but you know you can't come like this. I'm trying to keep a low profile." Tom raised his hands in a gesture of false innocence. I know, I just wanted to make sure you were okay. Oh, and congratulate you on your new romance, Emma. Thompson, right? A charming woman." The color drained from Jake's face. "How?" "I have my sources," Tom replied with a wink. "But don't worry, your secret is safe with me. Although I wonder if she guards hers with the same zeal." Before Jake could interrogate him further, Tom said goodbye with a promise to return soon. As he watched him leave, Jake felt the ground beneath his feet begin to shake. What did Tom know about Emma? And what did he plan to do with that information? That night, while having dinner with Emma at the small-town restaurant, Jake found himself distant and worried. Emma, noticing his change in attitude, took his hand. "Is everything okay, Jake? You seem worried." Jake looked at Emma, his eyes reflecting a whirlwind of emotions. Finally, he decided to be partially honest. "Emma, there's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice barely a whisper. "My past, it's complicated. There are things about me you don't know, things I fear might change how you feel about me." Emma squeezed his hand, her green eyes full of understanding. "Jake, we all have a past. What matters to me is who you are now, the man I've fallen in love with." Her words, although comforting, only increased Jake's guilt. He wanted to tell her everything, but the fear of losing her was too great. Instead, he decided to change the subject. "Thank you for understanding," he said with a forced smile. "How about we go for a picnic by the lake this weekend?" Emma nodded, but a shadow of concern crossed her face. She felt that Jake was hiding something important from her, and it troubled her. Meanwhile, Tom had returned to the city, his mind working on a plan to take advantage of the situation. He decided it was time to pay a visit to Emma's family, Emma's father. Robert Thompson, once a respected businessman, now lived modestly on the outskirts of the city. When Tom arrived at his door, the older man greeted him with distrust. "Mr. Thompson," Tom began with a calculated smile, "I have information that might interest you about your daughter Emma." Robert invited him in. His curiosity overcoming his caution, Tom proceeded to tell him about Emma's new life in Oakridge and her relationship with Jake, conveniently omitting Jack's true identity. "Your daughter seems to have found happiness," Tom said, his tone implying there was more to the story, "but I'm concerned she's being deceived. This Jake isn't who he claims to be." Robert, protective of his only daughter, became alarmed. "What do you mean? Who is he really?" Tom smiled inwardly, knowing he had taken the bait. "That, Mr. Thompson, is something we should discover together. For Emma's sake, of course." While Tom was planting the seeds of doubt in Robert's mind, Jake and Emma were enjoying their picnic day at the lake. The crystal-clear water reflected the blue sky, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of nearby pine trees. Emma laughed as Jake tried, without much success, to assemble an improvised fishing rod. "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" she asked between laughs. Jake looked at her, feigning indignation. "Of course I do. I'm an expert in urban fishing." "Urban fishing?" Emma raised an eyebrow, amused. "Is that what you did before coming to Oakridge?" The question, though innocent, made Jake tense up. "Something like that," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. Emma noticed the change in his attitude and decided to address the issue directly. "Jake, I feel like there's something you're not telling me. I know you said your past is complicated, but I want you to know you can trust me." Jake put down the improvised fishing rod and sat next to Emma, taking her hands in his. "Emma, there are so many things I want to tell you, but I'm afraid that when you know the truth, everything will change between us." "Nothing could change how I feel about you," Emma replied firmly. "I love you for who you are, Jake, not for your past or for what you have or don't have." Her words touched Jake deeply. At that moment, he was about to confess everything, but just as he opened his mouth to speak, his phone rang. It was a message from old Bill. "Emergency at the shop. Need your help urgently." Jake sighed, torn between his desire to be honest with Emma and his responsibility at work. "I'm sorry, I have to go. Bill needs me at the shop." Emma nodded, understanding, but evidently disappointed. "Go, we'll talk later." As Jake hurried back to town, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to lose something precious. The lie that had begun as a search for true love now threatened to destroy the only genuine thing he had found. In the city, Tom and Robert Thompson were planning their next move. "We need evidence," Robert said, his voice laden with paternal concern. "I can't just accuse this man without being sure." Tom smiled, a plan forming in his mind. "Don't worry, Mr. Thompson. I have an idea that will give us all the answers we need." As night fell over Oakridge, 3 souls were in conflict. Jake, struggling between his love for Emma and the weight of his lie. Emma, debating between her trust in Jake and the growing suspicion that there was more to his story. And Tom, driven by greed and jealousy, preparing to unleash a storm that threatened to destroy everything. What none of them knew was that fate had some more surprises in store, and that the truth, once revealed, would change their lives forever. The following days passed in a tense calm. Jake immersed himself in work at the shop, trying to silence the voice in his head that screamed at him to be honest with Emma. For her part, Emma focused on her classes, but couldn't help feeling that something was about to change. Meanwhile, Tom set his plan in motion. He hired a private investigator to follow Jake and gather information about his life in Oakridge. "I want to know everything," he instructed. "His routines, his contacts, especially his relationship with Emma Thompson." The investigator, a middle-aged man named Frank, began to prowl around the town posing as a tourist. He took photos discreetly and asked casual questions to the locals about the new mechanic. One afternoon, while Jake was working at the shop, Frank approached with a camera hanging from his neck, pretending to be a photography enthusiast. "Excuse me," he said with a friendly smile. "I'm doing a report on traditional trades. Would you mind if I take some photos of the shop?" Jake, suspecting nothing, agreed. "Sure, go ahead, although I'm not sure how traditional changing a car's oil is," he joked. As Frank took photos, he asked some seemingly innocent questions. "How long have you been working here?" "The town seems very quiet." "A few months," Jake replied, concentrating on the engine he was repairing. "And yes, it's a wonderful place to start over." Frank raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the choice of words. "Start over? Are you from the big city?" Jake realized he had said too much. "Something like that," he muttered, suddenly uncomfortable. "Excuse me, I have to finish this job." Frank withdrew. Satisfied with the information he had obtained that night, he sent a detailed report to Tom, highlighting his suspicions about Jake's mysterious past. Meanwhile, at the school, Emma was facing her own challenges. One of her students, little Lily, approached her after class with tears in her eyes. "Miss Emma," the child sobbed, "my dad lost his job and says we'll have to move. I don't want to leave." Emma hugged the girl, her heart going out to her. "Oh, Lily, I'm so sorry. You know what? I'll talk to the principal. Maybe we can find a way to help your family." That afternoon, Emma met with the school principal and some community members. Together, they decided to organize a charity fair to raise funds and help families in need in the town. "Jake is very good with his hands," Emma suggested. "Maybe he could organize a quick repair booth." The principal nodded enthusiastically. "Excellent idea. And we could ask for donations from some companies in the city. Emma offered to contact some people she knew from her previous life, including her father. Although their relationship had been strained since she decided to leave her comfortable life to be a teacher in a small town, she hoped he could help. That night, when Emma told Jake about the charity fair, she saw a spark of concern in his eyes. "Are you sure you want to contact people from the city?" Jake asked, trying to hide his unease. Emma looked at him, confused by his reaction. "It's just a few calls to ask for. Donations. Why does it worry you so much?" Jake ran a hand through his hair, nervous. "It's nothing. It's just that sometimes the past is better left behind." "Jake," Emma said, taking his hand, "I feel like there's something you're not telling me. What happened in your life before you came?" "Here?" Jake's heart was pounding. He knew it was time for the truth, but fear paralyzed him. "Emma, Just at that moment, Emma's phone rang. It was her father, Robert. "Emma, honey." Robert's voice sounded worried. "I need to talk to you about something important. It's about the man you're dating." Emma felt the world stop. "What do you mean, Dad?" "He's not who he says he is, Emma. I have proof. I'm coming to town tomorrow to show you." The call ended, leaving Emma in shock. She looked at Jake, who was watching her with a mixture of love and fear in his eyes. "Jake," Emma said, her voice trembling, "I need you to tell me the truth, the whole truth, now." Jake knew the moment he had feared so much had arrived. With a deep sigh, he began to speak. "My real name is Jack Morrison." As Jake revealed his identity and the reasons behind his deception, in the city, Tom smiled with satisfaction. His plan was working perfectly. Little did he know that his actions were about to trigger a series of events that no one could foresee. The storm that was brewing over Oakridge threatened to sweep away everything in its path, testing the love, loyalty, and truth of each of its inhabitants. The silence that followed Jake's confession was deafening. Emma stared at him, her face a mixture of shock, pain, and confusion. Jake's words echoed in her mind. "I'm Jack Morrison, a billionaire who pretended to be poor to find true love." "Everything, was it all a lie?" Emma managed to ask, her voice barely a whisper. Jake moved closer to her, trying to take her hands, but Emma stepped back. "No, Emma. My feelings for you are real. They're the most genuine thing I've ever felt in my life." Emma stood up, needing to put distance between them. "How can I believe you? You've been lying to me since the day we met." "I know, and I'm deeply sorry," Jake said, the desperation evident in his voice. "But you have to understand. All my life, people have only wanted me for my money. I needed to know if someone could love me for who I really am." "And who are you really, Jake, or should I say Jack?" Emma asked, tears beginning to fall down her cheeks. "Because right now, I'm not sure I know you at all." Before Jake could respond, the sound of a car parking in front of the house interrupted the tense scene. Moments later, the door burst open, revealing Robert Thompson, Emma's father, followed closely by Tom. "Emma!" Robert exclaimed, rushing towards his daughter. "Are you okay? Has this man hurt you?" Emma, still in shock, could barely mutter, "Dad, what are you doing here?" Tom stepped forward, a smile of satisfaction on his face. "We came to save you. Hematachi, to reveal the truth about this imposter." Jake looked at his former friend, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Tom, what have you done?" "What I had to do, dear friend," Tom replied, his voice loaded with sarcasm. "Or would you prefer I kept your dirty secret while you deceived this poor woman?" Robert, furious, confronted Jake. "How dare you play with my daughter like this? Do you think that because you're rich you can toy with people's feelings?" "It's not like that," Jake tried to explain, but was interrupted by Emma. "Enough, all of you," she said, her voice firm. Despite the tears, "Dad, Tom, I appreciate your concern, but this is between Jake and me. I need you to leave." Robert looked at his daughter, surprised by her firmness. "But Emma, please, Dad," Emma insisted. "I need to handle this on my own." Reluctantly, Robert nodded. Tom, however, wasn't willing to leave so easily. "Emma, you need to know the whole truth," he said, pulling an envelope from his jacket. "I have proof that he not only lied about his identity, but he's also been manipulating his company's stocks in your absence, Jack." Jake paled. "What are you talking about, Tom?" Tom smiled maliciously. "Oh, didn't you know? While you were playing poor mechanic, your stocks have been plummeting, and coincidentally, I've been buying them at bargain prices." The revelation fell like a bomb in the room. Jake staggered, suddenly understanding the extent of Tom's betrayal. Emma, seeing the genuine shock on Jake's face, intervened. "Tom, I think it's better if you leave. You too, Dad. I need to talk to Jake alone." Reluctantly, both men withdrew, leaving Emma and Jake alone in a silence charged with tension. Jack," Emma began, her voice shaky but determined. "I need you to tell me the whole truth. No more lies, no more secrets." Jake nodded, feeling the weight of his actions. For the next few hours, he told Emma everything: his life as a billionaire, the loneliness he felt, his decision to come to Oakridge, and how, without planning it, he had fallen deeply in love with her. "I understand if you can't forgive me," Jake concluded, his voice broken with emotion. "But you must know that every moment we spent together, every laugh, every conversation was real. I love you, Emma, and that's the only truth in all this madness." Emma looked at him, her eyes a mixture of pain and conflict. "I need time, Jake, to process all this, to understand what's real and what's not." Jake nodded, respecting her decision. When Emma left, he felt more alone than ever. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions and revelations. The news of Jake's true identity spread quickly through Oakridge, dividing the town between those who saw him as a liar and those who sympathized with his reasons. Old Bill, to Jake's surprise, was one of his biggest defenders. "The boy worked hard and honestly," he declared at the town barbershop. "I don't care if he has millions or cents, he's a good man." Meanwhile, Emma struggled with her own demons. She felt betrayed, but couldn't deny the feelings she had for Jake. In a moment of clarity, she decided she needed to know more about the man she had fallen in love with. She traveled to the city and, with the reluctant help of her father, began to investigate Jack Morrison. What she discovered surprised her. Anonymous donations to orphanages, scholarship, programs for low-income students, investments in clean energy. The real Jack Morrison was very different from the selfish billionaire stereotype she had imagined. While Emma was discovering Jake's true nature, he was facing his own challenges. Tom's revelation about the manipulation of his company's stocks had left him in a vulnerable position. Working remotely from Oakridge, Jake struggled to regain control of his financial empire. It was during this time that Jake had an epiphany. Money, power, influence, none of it mattered if he didn't have Emma by his side. He decided that, regardless of the cost, he would do the right thing. He organized a press conference in the city, where he revealed the whole truth about his social experiment in Oakridge. He admitted his mistakes, asked forgiveness from those he had deceived, and announced that he would donate a significant portion of his fortune to establish a development fund for small communities like Oakridge. "I've learned that true wealth isn't measured in dollars," he declared before the cameras, "but in the connections we make, in the authenticity of our relationships, and in the positive impact we can have on others' lives." Emma, who had been watching the press conference on the TV in her small apartment in Oakridge, felt her heart swell with pride and love. At that moment, she knew that despite the errors and lies, the man she had fallen in love with was real. Meanwhile, Tom watched as his plans crumbled. Jake's honesty had generated a wave of public sympathy, and the company's stocks began to recover their value. His hopes of taking control of the company were rapidly fading. In a last desperate attempt, Tom decided to play his final card. He had information about Emma's past, about how she had rejected the life of luxury her father wanted for her. If he couldn't have Jake's company, he would at least ensure he destroyed his happiness. What Tom didn't know was that fate had one more surprise in store, one that would change the course of history for everyone involved. The sun was setting over Oakridge, tinting the sky in golden and pink hues. Emma walked through the town streets, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. Jake's press conference had touched something deep in her heart, but she still struggled with the pain of betrayal. Meanwhile, in the city, Tom prepared to execute his final plan. He had contacted several journalists, promising them a juicy story about Emma Thompson's past, the woman who had tamed billionaire Jack Morrison. What Tom didn't know was that his actions were about to trigger a series of events that no one could have foreseen. That same night, as Emma debated whether to forgive Jake or not, she received an unexpected call. It was Lily, the little student whose family was going through financial difficulties. "Miss Emma," the child sobbed on the phone, "my dad, he had an accident at work. He's in the hospital." Without thinking twice, Emma headed to the small-town hospital. Upon arrival, she found a chaotic scene. Lily's father needed urgent surgery, but the hospital lacked the necessary equipment. "We need to transfer him to the city," explained the doctor on duty, "but we don't have the means to do it safely." At that moment, Emma made a decision that would change everything. She dialed Jake's number. Jake, who was in his old mansion in the city, answered on the first ring. "Emma?" "Jake, I need your help," Emma said, quickly explaining the situation. Without hesitating for a second, Jake sprang into action. "I'm on my way. I'll have a medical helicopter in Oakridge in less than an hour." While they waited for the helicopter to arrive, Emma and Jake worked together to stabilize Lily's father. Amidst the crisis, their eyes met, and for a moment, all the lies and secrets seemed to vanish. The helicopter arrived just in time, and Lily's father was transferred to a city hospital. Jake and Emma accompanied him, holding the hands of a scared Lily throughout the flight. Meanwhile, Tom had convened the press for his big revelation. However, when the journalists arrived, they found a very different story. News about the heroic rescue in Oakridge was already spreading, and the image of Jake and Emma working together to save a life was on all channels. Tom, seeing his plan crumble, attempted one last desperate move. He showed up at the hospital where they had taken Lily's father, determined to confront Jake and Emma. What he didn't expect was to find Robert Thompson, Emma's father, in the waiting room. "What are you doing here?" Tom asked. Surprised, Robert looked at him with a mixture of disgust and pity. "My daughter called me. I came to support her and to meet the man who truly loves her." At that moment, Jake and Emma came out of the surgery room, their hands intertwined. The operation had been a success. Tom, seeing the scene, felt his whole world collapse. In a fit of anger and frustration, he shouted, "This isn't fair. I should have it all. The company, the money, the girl." His outburst attracted the attention of everyone in the waiting room. Jake, Emma, and Robert looked at him with a mixture of surprise and pity. "Tom," Jake said, his voice calm but firm, "what is it that you really want? Why have you done all this?" The question seemed to deflate Tom. Suddenly, he looked smaller, more vulnerable. I just wanted to be like you, Jack. To have everything you have." Emma stepped forward, her face showing compassion despite everything Tom had done. "But Tom, don't you realize? What Jake has can't be bought with money. It's something that's earned through actions, through kindness, through genuine love." Emma's words seemed to hit Tom like lightning. He collapsed into a nearby chair, his head in his hands. "I've ruined everything, haven't I?" Jake approached his former friend and put a hand on his shoulder. "Not everything is lost, Tom. There's always time to change, to make things right." At that moment, the doctor came out of the operating room with good news. Lily's father was out of danger and would recover completely. Little Lily, who had been anxiously waiting, ran to hug Emma and Jake, tears of joy in her eyes. Thank you," the child exclaimed. "You're my guardian angels." The scene touched everyone present, even Tom, who watched in silence, a mixture of regret and wonder on his face. Robert, seeing the kindness and love radiating from Jake and Emma, finally understood why his daughter had chosen the life she led. He approached the couple and, in a gesture of reconciliation, hugged them both. "Forgive me," he said in a broken voice. "Now I see how special what you have is, Emma, my daughter. I'm proud of you and the woman you've become." Emma, with tears in her eyes, hugged her father. "Thank you, Dad. It means a lot to me." As the family reconciled, Tom stood up, determined to face the consequences of his actions. "Jake, Emma, I'm so sorry for everything. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I deeply regret what I've done." Jake and Emma exchanged a look, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, Jake spoke. "Tom, what you did was wrong, but everyone deserves a second chance. If you really want to change, we'll help you." Jake's offer surprised everyone, especially Tom. I don't know what to say, thank you." In the days that followed, the story of what happened in Oakridge spread like wildfire. The press, which had arrived expecting a scandal, found a story of redemption, love, and community. Jake and Emma, now closer than ever, decided to stay in Oakridge. Using Jake's resources and Emma's heart for teaching, they established a foundation to help small communities like theirs, providing education, healthcare, and development opportunities. Tom, true to his word to change, volunteered to work at the foundation, using his financial skills for something positive. For the first time in his life, the town of Oakridge flourished. The charity fair that Emma had planned became an annual event, attracting visitors from all over the country and raising funds for noble causes. One afternoon, as the sun set over the mountains surrounding the town, Jake and Emma walked hand in hand through the square. They stopped in front of the fountain, the place where they had first kissed. "You know," Jake said, looking at Emma with love, "I came here looking to discover if someone could love me for who I really am. I never imagined I'd end up discovering who I really am thanks to someone's love." Emma smiled, squeezing his hand. "And I never thought I'd find my true home and my true self in a small town, thanks to a billionaire disguised as a mechanic." They looked into each other's eyes, laughing softly at the absurdity and beauty of their story. Jake pulled a small box from his pocket and knelt in front of Emma. "Emma Thompson," he said, his voice trembling slightly with emotion, "would you do me the honor of marrying me? Not as Jack Morrison the billionaire, nor as Jake the mechanic, but simply as the man who loves you with all his heart." Emma, with tears of happiness in her eyes, nodded, "Yes, 1,000 times, yes." As they kissed, the townspeople, who had discreetly gathered around the square, erupted in applause and cheers. Old Bill, Lily and her family, Robert, and even Tom, all celebrated the love that had transformed not just 2 lives, but an entire community. And so, in the heart of Oakridge, under a starry sky and surrounded by the people they loved, Jake and Emma discovered that the true treasure wasn't in money or appearances, but in the authenticity of love and the strength of a united community. Their story, which had begun with a lie, had become the most beautiful truth they could have ever imagined. The months that followed passed in a whirlwind of activity and emotion. Oakridge gradually transformed from a quiet, forgotten town into a symbol of hope and community renewal. Jake and Emma's wedding was held in the town square, decorated with wildflowers and twinkling lights. The entire community participated in the preparations, turning the event into a celebration of love and unity that none of the attendees would ever forget. Old Bill, with tears in his eyes, walked Emma down the makeshift aisle in front of the old fountain. Jake, dressed in a simple but elegant suit, waited for her with a radiant smile. Robert, fully reconciled with his daughter and son-in-law, officiated the ceremony. "True love," Robert said during the ceremony, "isn't about perfection or the absence of mistakes. It's about forgiving, growing together, seeing the best in each other, even in the darkest moments." Jake and Emma have taught us all that, as the couple exchanged vows. Tom watched from a corner, a mixture of emotions on his face. When the time came for the rings, to everyone's surprise, Jake called Tom forward. "Tom," Jake said, "I know we've been through a lot, but I also know that without you, without the trials we faced, we might never have discovered the strength of our love. Would you do us the honor of being our best man?" The gesture of forgiveness and friendship moved Tom to tears. With trembling hands, he handed over the rings, symbolizing not only the union of Jake and Emma, but also the healing of old wounds and the beginning of new friendships. After the wedding, Jake and Emma devoted themselves body and soul to their foundation. Old Bill's repair shop became the headquarters of the New Dawn Foundation, a community center that offered educational programs, healthcare, and support for local entrepreneurs. Tom, true to his promise of change, became the foundation's financial director. His business world experience, now channeled for the common good, proved invaluable for the growth and sustainability of the projects Emma continued teaching. But now she did so in a modern, well-equipped school, built thanks to the foundation's funds. Her classes became a model of innovative education, attracting educators from all over the country who wanted to learn from her approach. Jake, for his part, divided his time between managing his companies, now with a much more ethical and sustainable focus, and working at the foundation. He discovered that his true passion lay in using his wealth and knowledge to make a real difference in people's lives. A year after the wedding, Emma gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. They named them William and Lily, in honor of the man who had been like a father to Jake in Oakridge, and the girl whose family had been the catalyst for so many positive changes. News of the birth spread quickly through the town. That night, the inhabitants of Oakridge organized a spontaneous celebration in the square paper lanterns illuminated the night sky, each carrying the townspeople's good wishes for the newborns. As Jake and Emma watched the scene from the hospital window, with their babies in their arms, they realized how far they had come since that first encounter at the repair shop. "Did you ever imagine your little experiment would end up like this?" Emma asked, resting her head on Jake's shoulder. Jake smiled, gently kissing his wife's forehead. "Not even in my wildest dreams. But I wouldn't change it for anything in the world." As the twins grew, Oakridge continued to thrive. The New Dawn Foundation expanded to other towns, bringing hope and opportunities to forgotten communities across the country. Tom, completely reformed, became a passionate advocate for corporate social responsibility. His story of redemption inspired other businessmen to rethink their priorities and use their wealth for the common good. Robert Thompson, Emma's father, moved to Oakridge to be close to his daughter and grandchildren. He found a new purpose in life, helping young entrepreneurs develop their business ideas through a mentoring program established by the foundation. Old Bill, although officially retired from the repair shop, remained a beloved figure in the community. He spent his days telling stories to the town's children, including the story of how a disguised billionaire and an idealistic teacher had changed Oakridge forever. 5 years after the wedding, on the anniversary of the foundation, Jake and Emma organized a grand celebration in the town square. They invited people from all the communities that had been touched by their work, turning the event into a festival of gratitude and hope. That night, standing in the same place where Jake had proposed marriage, the couple addressed the gathered crowd. "Years ago, I came to Oakridge looking for something I thought I was missing," Jake began. "I thought I was looking for love, but I was actually looking for a purpose, a sense of belonging," Emma continued. "And I, who thought I had already found my purpose in teaching, discovered that there was a whole world of possibilities I had never imagined." "Together," they said in unison, "we found something much bigger than ourselves. We found a community, a family, a home." As they spoke, Jake and Emma looked at the crowd. They saw their children, William and Lily, sitting on the shoulders of Old Bill and Robert. They saw Tom smiling with tears in his eyes. They saw the faces of hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by their love and their work. At that moment, under the stars of Oakridge, Jake and Emma knew they had found something much more valuable than any fortune. They had found their true place in the world, surrounded by authentic love and genuine purpose. And so, what began as a search for true love became a story of transformation, not just of two individuals, but of an entire community. Oakridge, once a forgotten town, had become a beacon of hope, a living testimony to the power of love, honesty, and compassion. The story of Jake and Emma, of the billionaire and the teacher, would become a legend passed down from generation to generation, a story that would remind everyone that a person's true value is not measured by their material wealth, but by the richness of their heart and the positive impact they have on the lives of others. 10 years had passed since that night in the square, and Oakridge had flourished beyond anyone's imagination. The small town had become a model of sustainable and community development, attracting visitors from all over the world who came to learn from its success. Jake and Emma, now in their 40s, remained the beating heart of the community. Their twins, William and Lily, had grown into curious and compassionate teenagers, embodying the values their parents had instilled in the community. One spring morning, as the family was having breakfast on the porch of their modest but cozy home, Jake had never returned to the ostentation of his previous life, William asked a question that took everyone by surprise. "Dad, Mom," William began, with unusual seriousness for his 12 years, "do you ever regret leaving your previous life? You know, the wealth, the fame, the city?" Jake and Emma exchanged a surprised look. Lily, William's twin, also looked up from her breakfast, clearly interested in the answer. Emma was the first to speak. "Honey, the life we have here, with you and with our entire community, is richer than any amount of money could buy." Jake nodded, placing his hand over Emma's. "You know, kids, when I was young, I thought success was measured in money and power. But here in Oakridge, I learned that true success is in the lives you touch, in the love you give and receive." "But what if you could have both?" pressed Lily, always the pragmatic one of the duo, the money and the love. Jake smiled, remembering how much his daughter resembled him in his youth. "The truth is, we do have both, sweetie. The New Dawn Foundation has grown more than we ever imagined. We help thousands of people every year, but we do it in a way that keeps us connected to what really matters." "Besides," Emma added, "true wealth is in moments like this, having breakfast together, watching our community grow, knowing we're making a real difference in the world." The twins seemed to reflect on this for a moment. Then William smiled. "I think I understand. It's like what Grandpa Bill always says. Love is the only treasure that grows when it's shared." "Exactly," said Jake, feeling a surge of pride in his children's wisdom. That afternoon, as Jake walked through the streets of Oakridge towards the Foundation's headquarters, he couldn't help but marvel at how the town had changed. The streets, once dusty and forgotten, were now full of life. Small local businesses flourished, schools were filled with enthusiastic children, and the very air seemed charged with hope and possibilities. Upon arriving at the Foundation, he met with Tom, who was now not only the financial director, but also his right-hand man in daily management. "Jake," Tom greeted him with a smile, "I have excellent news. The microcredit program we started in the neighboring region is bearing incredible fruit. Employment rates have increased by 15% in just 6 months." Jake smiled, remembering how far they had come since those days of rivalry and betrayal. "That's wonderful, Tom. You know, I was thinking, how would you feel about expanding the program nationwide?" Tom's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "Are you sure? It would be a big step." "I think it's time," Jake replied. "We've proven our model works. Imagine how many lives we could change if we took it to the whole country." As they discussed the details of the plan, Emma entered the office. With an expression of excitement on her face, "Jake, Tom, you won't believe this," she said, almost breathless. "I just received a call. We've been nominated for the Global Social Innovation Award. They want us to present our community development model at the international conference next month." The news took them by surprise. The Global Social Innovation Award was one of the most prestigious recognitions in the field of development and philanthropy. "This is incredible," Jake murmured, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the recognition. "It's more than that," said Tom, his voice full of emotion. "It's the validation of everything we've worked for. It's the opportunity to bring the spirit of Oakridge to the world." The three looked at each other, aware that they were on the brink of something big, something that could change not only their lives, but the lives of countless people around the world. In the weeks that followed, all of Oakridge mobilized to prepare the presentation. The story of how a forgotten town had transformed into a model of sustainable and community development was powerful, and everyone wanted to contribute to telling it. The day of the conference arrived faster than they expected. Jake and Emma found themselves on stage in front of an audience of world leaders, philanthropists, and social change agents. As they shared their story, from Jake's initial experiment to the creation of the foundation and the flourishing of Oakridge, Jake couldn't help but get emotional. He looked at Emma, remembering all the moments that had led them to this point. What began as a search for true love, Jake concluded, his voice laden with emotion, became something much bigger. "We discovered that when you open your heart to authentic love, you not only change your own life, but you create ripples that can transform entire communities." Emma took the floor, her eyes shining with passion. "Our message to all of you is simple. Real change begins with authenticity, compassion, and belief in the potential of every individual. It doesn't take great fortunes to make a difference. It takes a big heart and the will to act. The ovation that followed was deafening. When it was announced that the New Dawn Foundation had won the award, the joy and pride that Jake and Emma felt was not for themselves but for the entire Oakridge community that had made this achievement possible. That night, back in Oakridge, the whole town gathered in the square to celebrate. As Jake and Emma shared the news and showed off the award, they saw in the eyes of their neighbors, friends and family the reflection of a dream-fulfilled old Bill, now a venerable, elder but still full of life, approached them with tears in his eyes. "When you arrived at my shop years ago, Jake, I never imagined we'd be here today. Thank you for bringing light to our little corner of the world." Jake hugged the man who had been like a father to him. "No, Bill, thank you. And this entire community for teaching me the true meaning of success and happiness." As the celebration continued, Jake and Emma stepped away for a moment, walking towards the fountain where it had all begun. They sat on the edge as they had done so many times before. "You know," Emma said, resting her head on Jake's shoulder, "when I think about everything we've been through, everything we've built together, I realize that this is bigger than us. It's a legacy of love." Jake nodded, hugging her tightly. "A legacy that will continue long after us, in every life we touch, in every community we help flourish." They looked towards the square where their children played with other town kids, where Tom chatted animatedly with Robert and other community members, where the people of Oakridge celebrated not just an award, but the strength of their union and their ability to create positive change. At that moment, under the stars of Oakridge, Jake and Emma knew they had found something much more valuable than any fortune or recognition. They had found their purpose, their home, and a love that had not only transformed their lives but had created a movement of hope and change that would extend for generations. And so, the story that began with a billionaire in search of true love became a legend of transformation, compassion, and the inexhaustible power of authentic love to change the world, one heart at a time.